Hi, welcome to this week's Telehealth Secrets webinar. Before we get started, I have a few quick housekeeping items. My name is Anne, by the way. This session is recorded and it will be sent out. Also, you can put in your questions in the chat box as you think of them, and we'll get them answered during the Q&A session. And also, we have a lot more webinars about billing, malpractice, and other things. Just visit us at vsee.com/webinars. And let me go ahead and take a quick poll, see if anyone's having audio issues. If you can just raise your hand, there should be a little hand raise in your corner on your chat. If you can hear, please click your hand raise. Okay, good. Yeah, we have several people. Yeah, if you're having any trouble with your audio, please check the chat box. There's some troubleshooting tips there. All right, so with that, let me go ahead and I will drop off and hand the time over to Dr. Milton Chen.
Thanks, Anne. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning to this week's Telehealth Secrets. I'm Milton Chen, the CEO and co-founder of VSee. And then I'm really excited about today's guest, Justin Knott, CEO at Intrepid. And they've been doing like healthcare marketing for a bunch of years for medical practice, healthcare organization. They basically help these healthcare organizations to tell their stories, like promote their procedures, their specialties, and develop these very patient-centric marketing program. And I have the joy to work with Justin for a bunch of time, but he's just like amazing. And one of the reasons I'm sort of really excited about him is like we get a lot of people just asking us marketing, they need help on marketing. And I'm excited to have like the best here. In fact, Intrepid was recently named the top digital marketing agency in the US by Design Rush, Clutch, Obsidian. Again, so you want the best? We're happy to bring you the best. Now, some fun facts about Justin is, so he's about to become a new dad. Congratulations. Hopefully it was, like all the new stress and new dad. And again, I'm pretty sure he was still amazing work. And he also won an NCAA national championship in football at Notre State as a defensive end. And so, Justin, is there what else is interesting? Maybe some background about your, about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So Milton, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about marketing today. I know it's a hot topic with all the change that's going on in the healthcare ecosystem today. But yeah, I mean, my background is in this. I've been doing it for about almost 10 years now, specifically in health and medical. And as you alluded to, there's been a lot of changes. We moved from Atlanta after a decade to Orlando, bought a house and having a baby all in the middle of COVID. So it's been a great roller coaster. So I'm really excited to be on and talking about what I'm really passionate about. And I know what a lot of provider practices are eager to learn about and figure out how to more effectively tell their story and reach patients and improve patient care all at the same time through telehealth.
Yeah, but Justin, how did you get involved? I guess initial started with doing marketing for, providers and practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually came out of the venture capital world. That was where my background was, and we did a lot of in-house incubation. So I started a lot of companies, and that's where I got the kind of dip my toes, so to speak, in the marketing side and bridge that in Atlanta into what we had already, me and my wife, who was my business partner that we founded the agency together, had been in the medical marketing ecosystem dating back to 2010. And it was kind of a natural transition because of the network. And I saw a big opportunity because at that time, there weren't a lot of healthcare marketers like they are today. Now you have dental specific, you have specialty specific marketing agencies. So this ecosystem's really grown to address niche needs. But I was really drawn because what makes medical and healthcare just extremely unique is not only the legality hoops that you have to be careful that you're following, like HIPAA and Stark laws and all of that, but also too is it's a lot more about there's so many different layers about why providers got in to it to begin with from a patient care standpoint, and less about revenue and money. Obviously, that's a nice cause and effect, but it's about that. It's about patient care, and it's about how to tell your story, because I don't think there's really anything more personal, even having a baby right now, than my wife and that care and who we're choosing to handle with our future baby. And that's such an intimate, personal, really big decision. And that's a really interesting side in healthcare, is how do you tell that story? How do you build trust? How do you connect with patients where they are? And it's an ever changing. I mean, if you look at when we started 10 years ago and where we are sitting here now with COVID, and everything's gone digital, and patients are seeking out their own healthcare solutions. Forums and blogs have never been larger than they are. So it's been a journey, and I like it a lot because it takes a while to get used to this system, but once you're in it, it's a really fun ecosystem to be in. Health marketing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's the one thing I really like about the way your approach is about helping the practice tell their story. It's almost like, for example, if I go to like this their physical practice, right? Now this is like, it's nice, beautifully done, all this very well thought out. Then you go to the web page, it look like there's something made out like 20 years ago. It's like, oh my God. It's just like,
Exactly.
what's your story? Like communicate to your patient, like what is there? That's I love about your approach.
Yeah, and that is so critical, like you said, is first impressions. I mean, when you're again talking about patient care and their health, how you present yourself in a digital environment is so important. And we're huge believers, and we've talked about that, Milton, you and I, is we're really all about practice what you preach and getting provider level involvement. And the good thing is that providers are more and more concerned with how they're connecting with patients, their thought leadership, expressing what their specialty is and what they're good about. And when you marry those two, how you present yourself and getting the providers to develop that know, like, and trust relationship, it's powerful. It can be really powerful.
How about this? I'll turn the floor to you. I know you have some shared with the audience in there. How about we just, this floor is all yours, and afterwards, and we open up for the audience to ask your questions.
Perfect. That sounds great. Yeah, I'll jump in. Let me share my screen. Let me move this out of the way really quick. There we go. All right, let's see. Okay. All right, Milton, can you see my screen okay? All right. So yeah, like Milton and I have been talking about, obviously the topic of conversation today is, now that we've made as a result of COVID, made a really paradigm level shift into a digital ecosystem, and we're engaging with patients like we never have before. How do we address that and leverage telehealth technology to facilitate patient care, reach new patients, make sure the patients that we have been serving over all of these years, we keep them engaged? And so that's what I really want to talk about today for about 15 minutes, is kind of walking y'all through what our recommendations are after years of experience in telehealth and digital marketing, working with people like Milton and VSee, is what can y'all be doing as practices to reach more patients and kind of continue to serve the patients that you have as easy as possible. Milton already addressed it, but kind of why take my advice. I've been in this for about a decade. We've worked with 30 plus subspecialties in healthcare systems over the years. I think what makes us really unique is not only do I focus in the digital health ecosystem, but we also founded really the only online physician referral training platform, which I think gives a really unique in-depth, where we say we build online and offline. So not only do we help practices and healthcare systems address how they tell their story and what they should do with their websites and search engine optimization, but we also help them build out referral ecosystems, which have changed a lot. And then I've contributed a lot over the years to healthcare and large marketing sites. So as through this transition to telehealth, I think there's a major things that I wanted to really focus on today that we've seen as problems in practices and healthcare systems as they're trying to make this transition. And we'll go a little bit more in depth through these slides, but I think a big one is the lack of communication as it comes to patients and your practice. Are you open? how do they engage with you as far as booking appointments and getting in the telehealth waiting room? Are you going to start seeing patients? What are you doing for patient safety? All of those kind of things. Streamlining the workflows in this new environment, I know, has proven to be cumbersome, because you're trying to not only keep your doors open, but you're trying to see patients and you're trying to streamline things, as well as integrating those technologies. There's so many different EMRs out there. There's so many different softwares that are at play generally with practices. So what do you need to be doing on that end? And then again, going back to appointment booking, as well as continuing to build strong referral relationships, because that's the backbone of a lot of practices too. And it's gone from having boots on the ground where you could do face-to-face lunch and learns, coffees, those kind of things. And now everything has shifted. So how do we address that issue moving forward? The other interesting thing, and I think it's really one of my things that I'm passionate about in this telehealth shift, and why I wanted to have a slide on its own, is I think what's been so interesting over the last 4-ish months since COVID's happened is there's been, to some degree, whether you want to call it statewide or regional or even national, there's been a loss of what practices used to have in a geographical marketing protection, where you had this kind of bubble that you could live in of the 20 or 30 mile radius around your practice that patients were generally willing to travel. Obviously, if you're in MD Anderson or something like that, they're willing to go state level or travel nationally. But for most practices, they're really concerned about, how do I reach an audience in my general geographical area? And all of a sudden, with things shifting online, you've got the teledocs of the world, the doctors on demand, all of those that have come into the mix as far as bidding on AdWords. You've got mental health, telehealth as well, that all of a sudden has entered these spaces. But I see it as, if you can tactically shift and you can get really focused on what you want to grow and how you want to leverage telehealth, it can be a major advantage, because on the flip side, more patients than ever are going online to find solutions. I mean, I just had a conversation today with a rheumatologist that is trying to create his own telehealth ecosystem to start seeing patients in a moonlight kind of setting, so they can get second opinions and help manage osteoporosis, all of those kind of things. So it can be a major advantage. But on the con side, you need to be aware that you do have large 800-pound gorillas in the room when it comes to digital. So you want to be proactive in your approach, so they don't start poaching what could be your potential patients. And so that's the big thing, is how do we address these issues that I just mentioned? And I think one of the big things, and this is what we're going to talk about, is really creating a game plan around telehealth, the transition to digital, what things you can be doing, as well as when you begin to open your doors more and more, how you're going to create a streamline of patients. And I think it does really start with a strategic approach to that. And one of the big things, and I have a story to tell about this with being a new father, is overly communicate to your patients. I think that that's really big, and it sounds so very simple, but when we started our journey in Atlanta trying to find an OBGYN and then doing an out-of-state move and having to transfer and find it, one of the hardest things really early on is there was such mixed or no information on a lot of OBGYN sites in Atlanta. So we would go on a website, they'd say you need to call, we'd call, and then their recorded message would say you need to go online to book. You're getting like ping ponged all over the place. So I think that's, if you take a step back and look at it, kind of keeping it simple, is make sure you have very clear communication and leverage an omni-channel approach to do that. And not only how you're handling telehealth and seeing patients over telehealth, but how you're handling COVID. I mean, as simple as, are you open? If you are open, what sanitation practices are you implementing to keep patients safe? And those start with, and there's actual screenshots on here in the top right, you'll see a pop-up on a large orthopedic practice that we use to streamline appointment scheduling for their telehealth solution, as well as we're using announcement bars. So on the top of your website, you can put an announcement bar up there for how people can schedule online appointments or book telehealth. And the other two things, as I mentioned, is with the COVID related stuff, is be as detailed as you can and keep that page fresh and up to date as things are coming out. So don't neglect it. And then make sure that you have, especially because you have to assume the 50 and older, 55 and older part of the population is really going to lean on y'all for how they adapt in a telehealth environment. So try to explain that out, even in a step-by-step process on a landing page on your website. And people like VSee are there to help. And they have lots of video assets, lots of content that you can lean on. And all you need to do is ask, and you can get that information up. So it's really, really straightforward. The other lines of communication is most everybody's got email. You've got all of your patient emails. So coach them through what this new lay of the land looks like, how we're seeing patients, what telehealth solution that we're using, all of those kind of things. Post it out on social media. We've had a bunch of clients that we have a routine cadence where we've had up to 15 updates that have gone out about the practice evolution. And that's a really, really important. And another little cool tip is, and it can be as easy as your iPhone, keep it really simple, but leverage video. It's an unknown ecosystem still for especially the older part of the population. And I've seen a lot of practices used with great effect, pulling out an iPhone and simply just getting a patient saying it really was that easy to see my physician or do a post-operative follow-up or whatever it is. And those are really big things to not only put on your site, but put on social media, because when you have potential patients coming there, they're going to see so many different things. They're going to know what's going on with COVID on the website. They're going to know that patients are easily being able to interface with you, and they're going to see video proof of it. So keep those. Those are things that we're using, is get pop-ups on, use email, use social media, and leverage video. So really go the extra mile to communicate. And then the other part of it is, once you do have a telehealth solution like VSee, is make sure you're streamlining those visits as much as you possibly can. And on the next page, I actually have a kind of a map that I'll show you of a potential setup that you could use. But make sure that when somebody does book a telehealth appointment, that they're getting plenty of appointment reminders. That's really important, because you want to try to get in front of any potential hiccups or hurdles that they could run into as far in the front as possible, and not the day of, 5 minutes before or after your appointment is supposed to be started. And then, like I mentioned, include download, setup instructions, offer email and phone number support. One thing that's amazing about VSee is the fact that they'll help you with that. And that's the reason really why they're our go-to for our provider practices, is because it makes it so easy, because you really don't have to worry about it. You can lean on them as well as you can lean on your internal staff through training, but make sure that you're at the ready, because patient frustration coupled with fear in the marketplace, all of those things are just a recipe for people getting frustrated and you losing them all over something as simple as just making sure it's really easy for them to get on a telehealth visit. And lastly is the EMR integration. There's been a lot of people asking us, and I know we received a lot of questions about this webinar, is what do you do about billing and integration with your EMR? And what I'd say is make it dependent on either the functionality of your EMR, like how easy and interoperable it is with your EMR or your telehealth solution that you're using, but don't stress yourself out about it. If you're in a really large ecosystem that has limited bandwidth, it could be worth your time and investment. But I think when it gets to, if you're a smaller individual practice or you're using an EMR that may be specific to your specialty, whether it's a psychiatric practice or behavioral health or anything like that, it may not be worth that battle to try to figure out what your EMR can and can't do, trying to get it integrated, all to save a little bit of time on billing. So I would try to pick your battles, especially in a system like this. But if you do have the opportunity, then it could be worth the extra mile to go the integration. And this is a really good example. I wanted to make this because I always think visuals help, because this can be confusing. So this looks a little bit like a maze, but it's actually pretty simple. What it is really just showing you're going to have traffic at some level. That's what this is at the top. And could be Google, Facebook ads, Google ads, which is something we're going to get into more in a second. But people are going to enter some way, shape, or form. And there's a couple different ways that they can interface with you when they get in. And that can be an opt-in landing page, that could be website, that could be web chat functionalities, which we've used with great effect. That could be an appointment booking pop-up. There should be a bunch of different, easy, simple ways for patients to ask questions, find information, and more importantly, like we're talking about today, book a telehealth appointment with you. And if they don't, that's where we can leverage remarketing with great effect to bring them back into our ecosystem. But if they do, we want to make sure that we're hitting them with a series of emails leading up to that day of the appointment reminder. So again, going back to just consistent communication over and over and over again about expectations, what we're going to deliver, and how the visit's going to be. And so that's a really good map. And again, you'll be able to download all of these so you can kind of look at what that patient journey is. And online appointment booking functions. A lot of telehealth are offering this, but if they don't, I just highly recommend, regardless of what your setup is, that especially in today's ecosystem, that you have online appointment booking, and for several different layers, for ease of use, obviously for patients, but as a marketer, these tools are our best friend when it comes to conversion rate tracking and attribution. Without online appointment booking, it gets really hard to prove the value that the marketing and the advertising you're trying to do delivers. And so that's, I think, can be really, really helpful, because online appointment booking, you're able to actually follow people from the touch point of an ad delivery, clicking, going into the website, booking the appointment, and going and being seen. So that's another huge advantage from a marketing standpoint as a healthcare marketer, is it's going to help you track better to the ROI of all of your marketing initiatives having online appointment booking too. And then the other side of it, which is more kind of the offline side that I alluded to, is how do we continue to strengthen referral relationships while this is going on? And I actually have an actual screenshot from my wife, Kelly, who lives in this ecosystem and has really worked with hundreds and hundreds of physician liaisons across the country making this shift. And as simple enough as it is continue to reach out in a digital environment, is leverage your telehealth solution, leverage FaceTime or video conferencing, but try to continue to get as many touch points. Whether you do or don't have a physician liaison, maybe it can be your office manager that spearheads that, or you as the provider could spearhead that too. But you want to make sure you're keeping strong referral relationships, because that's not going anywhere. Even though the ecosystem has changed, upstream referrals or specialty to specialty referrals still have to occur. And you can be there to continue to support and facilitate that by leveraging LinkedIn, leveraging email, and leveraging video. So don't forget about that while you're going into the marketing side of things, is continue to push and reach out to your existing referral stream. So now kind of the meat of, I know a lot of y'all are thinking, well, this is all great, but how do I go out and actually market and grow my practice? And so I did want to talk about the healthcare marketer and me addressing kind of things that we've actually been using and the recommended channels that can be really effective to grow and to reach new patients in your geolocation level, as well as state and nationally, depending on what type of practice. And that's search-based ads, so Google ads, which is the common one, social media-based ads, so Facebook and Instagram, as well as search engine optimization. So search and social ads, what I wanted to give y'all a little kind of nugget is, this is an actual list of 6 ad type ideas that we have leveraged, and I actually have actual screenshots right here of clients and how they're used. Direct response is essentially like the hard ask, like book an appointment. Those are obviously fantastic because you get people to book appointments, but they don't have to be the only option that y'all use. There's a lot of other avenues to convert people and drive traffic and get them into your ecosystem. We've used, in this bottom right, we have a women's health facility that we used quizzes to great tactical effect and shaved about 90% of our cost per conversion rate, where we were getting conversions for less than $1. The first month we launched this, we got almost 350 quiz fill outs for symptomatic based menopause women in a 15-mile geographical radius around this practice. And then you get them into nurture sequencing, and that can be really, really, really powerful stuff for about $1 a pop. So webinars can be really effective. Search-based ads, which are in these top right, can be highly, highly effective, as well as webinars or Facebook events can be really, really great too. We have an orthopedic practice specifically that's here that last week we did a Facebook event for a webinar for one of their shoulder surgeons that was trying to grow more shoulder surgeries. So we leverage event-based ads on Facebook, plus their existing email list. And in only 5 days of marketing, we got 55 people registered, 45 people showed up. So over an 80% webinar attendance rate, which is remarkable considering the industry standards are 20 to 30%. One patient booked an appointment while on the webinar, and we have 3 or 4 more that have reached out and inquired. So those are huge numbers. And for very little cost too. So these are, again, they don't have to be the hard ass book an appointment. You're scratching your head like, why can't I get anybody? Think outside the box a little bit, leverage quizzes, leverage downloads, go into support groups and offer help and tips and tricks. Those kind of things can be really effective avenues to an advertising without breaking the bank and spending tens of thousands of dollars a month. Big tips here that we've seen where people have stumbled and fallen is leverage remarketing. And that's like I put up here in the top right, the Facebook pixel. Make sure that you have the Facebook pixel, the LinkedIn pixel, all of those on your site, because those actually cookie your visitors so you can retarget them. And retargeting is the cheapest and one of the most effective ways to get people back in, because they're already familiar with your brand. They've already been on your website. They've already read who you are. They've probably seen a social media post. So make sure you're doing that, because I've seen way too many people where we come in to begin a marketing strategy with them, and they have missed all of this historical data by not having their Facebook pixel or not having Google Tag Manager, those things that even if you're not using them today, you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. So make sure you're collecting that data. Make sure you're nurturing this ecosystem. So if you're bringing leads in, continue to deliver value-based emails. The more you can segment and personalize those, the more effective that they're going to be long-term. But going back to say that Metapause, when we had those 350 leads came in a perfect world, you're only going to get say 20% that convert and book. So what are you doing with the other 80%? You want to get them into a nurture sequence where you're building a trust relationship. And that can be common symptoms or how we treat them. It's all about building trust, getting your providers involved, like Milton and I talked about, all those things. And lean on data. Is don't guess. Is there, I mean, these platforms are really rich with data as you're advertising, and they should be your best friend when you're making educated marketing decisions. And get video involved. Video converts way better than anything else that's out there. And I think the last most important tip is be patient. Is a lot of people think I turn on ads today and by 5 p.m. today, everything should be working. And that's not the case. Even if you have a vetted and tested 100% effective, perfect funnel, it's going to take some time for testing and ramping. So be smart with your budgets and your money. Start small with something that you're comfortable investing. Make sure it's obviously enough to get data back, but then refine things, test against things, and then start to scale. So go in with reasonable expectations. Is it's going to take a little bit of time. On the SEO side of things, I think these are the most important tips without getting too deep in the water. Is if you're looking at how do I improve, whether it's knee replacements or whatever it is from a local ranking factor to drive more visibility on my site for the patients that I care about. And it starts with 2 things, your website and your Google My Business. Google My Business is unique because in healthcare, as providers, you can have a Google My Business where most other verticals cannot. So leverage that to great effect. So if you're an orthopedic surgeon, make sure you have your entire profile completed, leverage as many categories that are accurate as you can, sports medicine physician, orthopedic physician, all those, plus fill out your description. Go as far into it as you can, in depth, lots of images, because that's going to be really important. And the other thing is, as it relates to your website, there's a general rule of thumb that I tell all of my potential clients or anyone listening today. And if you leave with anything, this is really important from an SEO perspective, is if you want to rank for it, you need a page for it. Don't fall victim to listing your conditions, your treatments, or your services on a page in a bulleted fashion and call it a day. If you want to rank for any service that you offer, going back to knee replacement, you need a well thought out page about knee replacement. How long does it take to recover? What are the warning signs you may need a knee replacement? All of these kind of things, because the more you do that, the better you stand to rank in your local search environment. And that's what all the rest of this list is about, is blog and write about knee replacements again, and then point it to that page. So you just want to cover the topic really, really well, and then add GI identifier. So if you're in Austin, Texas, it should be knee replacement in Austin, Texas in your tag. So keep those things in mind, and those are what we're using to great effect to, now we've got a telemedicine solution. We've ironed out all of the issues that could stand, patient could stand to face, and we're going out and we're growing. We're using advertising and search. If you keep those things in mind, you're going to grow well in a COVID ecosystem like it is today. Let me jump out of here real quick.
Listen, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, thanks for sharing your insight. By the way, for the audience member, please feel free to just pour your question on, and there I want to answer them live on the air. Because I just so I mean, you share a lot of great insight in there. For example, let's say I'm an individual, let's say like rheumatologist or one of these things. Like how much like budget for marketing? Like, what's the monthly budget that you feel like?
Sure. That's a great question. That's one of the first and main questions that we get a lot. And I want to make sure you leave with some specific numbers, because all too often people will say, well, it could be $500 or $500,000. And it's like, well, if you're really looking at giving a scenario of a 2 or 3 provider practice, or even a 1 provider, 1 location practice, it's definitely, there's going to be cost dependent of how competitive your ecosystem is. But if we back into, say you're in a normal metropolitan area, you've got 1 or 2 physicians, your surgical or non-surgical specialty practice, I would recommend in the $2,000 a month ecosystem range as a starting point. I think that's a healthy budget to where you should be able to get help growing some content and some blogs. You should be getting help with review generation and listings, and that gives you some money to invest in advertising. And then I would go up from there. Obviously, the closer to the $5,000 mark that you can get when it goes kind of all in to what you're spending ads is really good baseline. And then obviously you want to have a multiplier by the number of physicians, the value of your surgeries or your patient visits, those things. But I always say 2,000 to 2,500 should be your foundational floor if you're thinking about investing into marketing monthly. I think it gives you enough wiggle room.
So at that, let's suppose you have like a 2,000, 2,500 range in there. Is there like a rule of thumb to say like, like how many new patient you can acquire, like roughly, like, because I'm thinking I want to get down to the cost, customer acquisition cost in there. Like, what would that translate
Absolutely.
to?
That's a great question. So I always say you have to back into your customer acquisition number a little bit, because if you're going after hip replacements or something that can be worth thousands and thousands of dollars, you should be willing to have a little bit of a higher cost per acquisition threshold.
Sure.
Versus if you're a pediatric urgent care or something like that, that may be in the $100 to $150 per patient value. But I think it can be a good rule of thumb that if you can get in the like a good example is that women's health facility. They're non-surgical. They're focused on perimenopause, postmenopause, hormone replacement, those. And our cost per acquisition goal was between $30 and $35. If we could stay below that hurdle, we knew we were setting ourselves up for them to get a good return on their investment based on what they were going to be reimbursed for the initial menopause visit and the lab tests and all of that. So while there's not a hard and fast rule, you want to make sure that what you're spending, that you can back into a number that's reasonable from a cost per acquisition. So if you're only making $50 per patient on a visit, then you need to be really, really tactical about where you're spending your money. Because if you're spending $5,000, you better be getting hundreds of leads and a lot of those converting into booked appointments. So while there's not an exact number, what I always like to say is sit down and think when you're kind of doing a reverse engineering it, think through what your average patient is worth that you want to begin attracting, and then think about how many you would need to drive through the door, and then that should set your expectation levels for your budget.
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So, like, for example, you mentioned in your talk, it takes a while for this marketing effort to get going in there. Like, supposedly, a practice start with a marketing effort, like, let's say today. Like
Yeah.
what's the rule, either rule of thumb until like how many months into the they should start seeing the, like the
Yes,
new
that's
patients are.
absolutely. So I'll talk about the two sides of the tracks really briefly. When it comes to paid advertising, you should see results if it's a tested um, agency or whoever's doing the ads execution. If they're tested, you should begin seeing effective results for your paid ads within the first 30 days. Now, to
Okay.
set expectations with that, it takes, and we tell all of our clients, it takes a good agency 90 days to fully optimize a campaigns for ramp. That does not mean that it will take that long to see effective results. What it means is that gives enough time to get enough data sets back to make educated decisions on what needs to be shut down and what needs to be scaled. Because all too often people run an ad for a week and they're like, this doesn't work. And maybe we needed to test out different geo identifiers or test another interest level or test the ad copy. And that could have been the secret sauce that exploded that campaign. So what I say is 30 days, you should be seeing results. If you're not, I would start to be a little bit concerned if the first 4 to 6 weeks you're not starting to see lead generation. But I would, if you're going the route of investing in digital advertising, commit at least to 90 days because that's what it's going to take to build out an ecosystem. So that's that side. The SEO side, I say it is a 90-day play to get the ball really, really going on SEO. Again, depending on how competitive of a market, if you're in like downtown Los Angeles, it could take longer. But in general, rule of thumb, the first 6 weeks should net a 10 to 15% growth in organic search. It takes about 90 days to start changing Google's mind about what we're doing, what we're trying to grow, and the changes that we've been making. It takes 6 months to create, I think, a full head of steam. And in a year's time, you should be able to effectively chart your new course. And I know people say, well, if I go the SEO route, I'm going to have to wait a year. It's not what I mean. What I mean is it's just to get to where you probably envision you want to be, it's going to take a year, but 90 days, 6 months, 12 months should be the marks that you focus on with SEO.
Okay, great. So we have a question from David in the audience. He said, like, so how do you get the elderly comfortable with this word telemedicine when they're maybe intrinsically uncomfortable or distrustful technology? Is there certain things through the marketing you can just help those targets feel comfortable, can like embrace telehealth?
Absolutely. That's a great question. That's been one of the areas I think of the greatest concern is I remember the first time we tried to do a family Zoom when all the COVID happened. We hadn't seen our family in a month, and it took like about 45 minutes of the hour call to get my in-laws on the Zoom. So I totally understand. I think the biggest things is, again, over communication. What I've seen the most effective practices doing when addressing the elderly population is leveraging stories. Like the video that I mentioned has been really effective, as other patients talking about their experience with a telemedicine visit. Because I think some of the not knowing is fear compounding. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really, really frustrated. So the more you can alleviate that by kind of delivering content that puts them in understanding that you're putting yourself in their shoes, I think really helps. The other side is try some other mediums. Like you can use mailers, like you can send an actual letter about how we're going about doing things. So use other avenues that they've been comfortable with over many years. And it may not be social media. I think if you are using social media, keep in mind that the biggest shift has occurred onto Facebook when it comes to 55, 60 and older. That's where most of that population is. So leverage Facebook as an effective communication tool there. But I would rely on letters and emails and video, all three of them, and hit them with as many emails as you can, and see like what you're doing, Milton. See what your telehealth solution, especially VSee, provides, because they're could be waiting in the wings, ready to help you out if those issues pop up from a compatibility standpoint.
Great. So I have a question from Jennifer suggesting, for example, as a psychologist, right? So you could be actually sanctioned by the licensing board if you maybe use an extreme example. I know no one would do this. For example, let's say you record a session with a patient, and this is for like let's say you record the session, the video is put online. Of course, no one should do that. What about in terms of, let's say you have a patient who like love, they like give you a 5-star rating. Is it okay just take them and push onto your like Google or your front page, and then like to what extent you need to get a happy patient permission until you could just put their rating like on your storefront?
Great question. So how can you safely leverage social proof that has been provided by a patient?
Because
So
I guess I'm coming from it, a lot of times there's very strict HIPAA patient privacy in there, right? In this case, from the marketing, I'm doing a great job with my patient love my service. Like, what's the boundary between like let them become my market? Like,
your ambassador, yeah, and patient social proof and them as ambassadors is like the most powerful channel too. So it is trying to figure that out, is how can I leverage that. So on the video side of things, I do think it is important to have written patient consent. Video can be a murky thing. So if you're going the route, which is probably one of the most powerful ways, the most powerful way to collect it. So it can be such an important tool, but I think it is important, and we coach all of our clients when we go the route of collecting patient satisfaction over video, is do get written patient consent,
okay.
because it's just it's definitely a gray area, and I think that's an extra layer of protection. Even though they may have verbally told you 10 times and they even agreed to come in and film a video, they've obviously given you consent. That's not written down anywhere like it is if they're leaving a third-party Google review, which kind of bridges that gap. They've put themselves out there. You have to be careful in your response to them, but from a legality standpoint, you're safe to use that from a promotion standpoint, unless they explicitly ask you, like you post it on your website or something, ask you to take it down, respect that space. But when it comes to third party or first party submission reviews in a written format, you can leverage those if they've been given freely by them, safely. So you can definitely use those for social proof. But again, when it goes into the video format, I always say it's better safe than sorry, is get some
Sure.
level of written consent release from them. But I don't want to discourage you from doing that, because it's definitely it's probably the most effective marketing tool. I know it's the first thing that we request when we walk into a new client relationship is, do you have any patients that are on fire and ambassadors and willing to do some video? Because if we can use that for marketing, we'll be effective.
Sure, that makes sense in there. How about so for example, there's many different services. For example, like things like ZocDoc, HealthGrade. So part of their value proposition, right? You create a profile on them, you pay them a couple $100 a month, then they sort of send new patient to you. Like, how do you find as like that versus like have your own marketing strategy campaign, like a couple thousand a month in there? Do you have a feel for? Like, is ZocDoc or HealthGrade, is that enough, or why would you need to spend more?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope ZocDoc's not listening to my statement. So I mean, kudos to them and the environments that they've built out, ZocDoc and HealthGrades and Vitals for sure. My firm belief is building your own success pathway is always going to be preferred. Even when it goes into Google Ads, being reliant, whether it's on ZocDoc and them driving appointments to you, or it's HealthGrades, always makes me nervous long term, because I've been in it for over a decade to see them come and go, as well as, like you've seen as ZocDoc as an example, a cataclysmic shift in their pricing model that has evaporated a lot of business that could even afford them. I mean, they went from charging like $300 a month to charging on a per appointment basis. And that just can be an astronomical cost to some practices that could have built a foundation on that. And that's a scary thing to me, because if you look at what happened in the Facebook ecosystem, is when their IPO happened and they went public, they went from a 90% organic reach for posts down to a 2% reach. And overnight businesses closed, like e-commerce businesses, the ones that were driving, they had 1 million Facebook followers and they'd post something out and they'd make $100,000 in sales. All of a sudden they had to spend money to make money on their ads platform. So I think that the more that you can focus on building your own pathway long term, and that doesn't mean like shut your ZocDoc down tomorrow. It just means think ahead, because what if that changes again and it becomes absolutely unaffordable for you to make an ROI? You need a backup plan. So you need to be building out your email list, building out your social engagement and community. You need to be building out your own advertising pipelines. I think that there's huge value in those for sure because of just the sheer volume of reach that they have. There's nothing wrong with that by any means, but I always think long terms in a what if scenario. What if they triple their pricing tomorrow?
Yeah.
What's my game plan? And so that's how I always answer that question. Is there can be of great value. They can drive a lot of things, but always be planning long term to build your own engagement ecosystem.
Got it, that makes sense. So we have a question from Jane asking, what would be good tips for, let's say you have a brand new practice as a psychologist, right? No custom base to starting out with, but I got telemedicine set up. Now I need to, what should Jane do?
Yes, that is a really great question. So I think that there's twofold when you're starting out. I think the biggest thing is you really want to make sure that you're setting yourself up in a local search environment. And that goes back to, it starts with your Google My Business, is make sure that you've really filled all of that stuff out really, really well. And the patients that you do have from a seed perspective is really focus on getting them as early adopters as building reviews. And invest in, I know it can be kind of a tough pill to swallow out of the gate, but make sure that you invest in a website foundation that you can build on. So you're going to have to invest a little additional time when you're starting out like that to write your own content. But I really encourage go the extra step. Don't copy and paste off of it. Be willing to write in-depth, well thought out content around the things that you as a psychologist really want to bring in and deal with and see. Then you can go out and you can find a professional to help you get that on your website in a proper structured manner. But I think if you have little to invest here today and you're looking at what can I do to get on the pathway of reaching new patients, optimize your Google My Business and invest in developing content on your website that it really lines up with the types of conditions and treatments that you're trying to bring in and rank for.
So I mean, for these, where often you have a new practice, right? There are just all these expenses in there. Like, is there a rule of thumb, for example, if you build out a new psychology practice, how much money should you devote for marketing? I know you have the like 2,000 a month in there. Is that still the same rule apply for that?
I would say I would be probably ready to invest in the, again, there's a range here, but I always say on the upfront side of getting your tools, your site, content, if you are going the ads route, those ecosystems, I'd probably plan to invest in the $10,000 to $20,000 range in those first probably 60 to 90 days, getting all of that stuff built out. Again, you have to think about your website should last for 3 to 5 years. So you're thinking about this from a 3 to 5 year capital investment and return on investment play. So always people are like, whoa, that's a big pill to swallow. It should be a 3 to 5 year investment play if your website foundationally built the right way. And then I would ramp. I always recommend when it comes to new practices, and this is how we address it, is taking a phased approach. Is start with your listings, start with helping your agency or whoever you're working with the content creation to keep costs down while you do have more bandwidth and you're not filled out, your book of business isn't full. So save the money, invest and write your own content and leverage them for listings and review generation and some ad spend, and do ad spend in a very local geographical environment. And you should be able to start at the $750 to $1,000 a month mark as a brand new provider, but be willing to bootstrap as far as you grow, pour money in, because you need to be aware you need to get to certain levels of spend to grow. But I think that you should be able to do that. If you're willing to put in a little bit of elbow grease, I think you should be able to get there.
Got it. Okay. So I have a question from Bill. This seems really interesting. So Bill has a doctor client that they're building a funnel for Botox, but I think the doctor says so she does not collect email on the website because she's not allowed to collect email. Could I ask, is that true or false? Like, I mean,
That's false. You can collect email. They can give it over. I would not go past a certain level of PHI as far as name, email, phone number, what services they want. But you're safely within the HIPAA guidelines to collect that information. You 100% need to make sure you're doing it in a secure fashion from the standpoint of have an SSL certificate on your website. So everything that is coming across in an encrypted manner. And then other than that, you are safe from a data collection standpoint for a potential Botox user to see an ad, click through on that ad, fill out a form to request information, and then you follow up and engage them from there. That's HIPAA compliant. You're good. Obviously, don't do anything like foolish, like posting their information on social media or anything. But if you're just receiving their information over your email and following up with them, you're completely in HIPAA guidelines. I just would highly recommend that you have an SSL certificate on your site so that info is encrypted.
Yeah, I agree with that. Bill, I agree with that. I think email far is one of the most powerful way to do marketing. You should like any chance you get to grab the email, like do it in there because just now this one you can do like just webinar. You can do the email drip campaign for them. You just send them information there. It's like if you don't have an email, you almost you're crippled in terms of your marketing.
I could not agree more, and we talk about that all the time, and people say, is email dead? You hear about high open rates with SMS text message. I still think hard and fast, I could not agree with you more, Milton. Email, and no matter what vertical you're in, really is the most powerful tool still that you can use to bring people back in from a data point standpoint. I still think that people should really focus on leveraging that long term.
Yeah. So I have a question from Santo asking, so if you offer online teletherapy exclusively, right, just 100% telehealth, teletherapy, now how important is to place yourself on Google search? I guess another way I'm saying is like, so when you talk about, these were like a $10,000, $20,000 investment, and I know like a lot of the client we work with, that's actually will be like way too big to swallow. Now, for example, if you get a pick between doing some Facebook ad, some Google ad, maybe make yourself Google SEO friendly in there, like what would you do if you're going to do maybe one thing in terms of for teletherapy?
As far as growing it, like what avenue you should focus marketing on?
Yeah, if you're going to do like one thing, like what would you recommend?
Ooh, that's good. That's a very good question. I think it's dependent. How I would answer that if I was walking into a situation, somebody set me down as like, I want to grow, I want to see 1,000 patients a week between our providers for teletherapy. Which avenue should I choose? I think it would go back to doing some search engine optimization research. How big is that ecosystem from a search volume standpoint? Because if it's not big enough to support that, then I would recommend going another route and leveraging advertising. So then what I would do is I would create video assets that explain the value creation and the positioning of what we do, how we help, what services we provide, again, patient testimonials, those kind of things, and leverage advertising platforms to drive in the teletherapy ecosystem. I don't know what type of therapy, if it's speech pathology or what it may be, but like that ecosystem is really well supported on social media because a lot of speech pathology is pediatrics. And so you're trying to reach either pediatricians to refer to you, or you're trying to reach direct to consumer and reach moms and dads who have children that are struggling with speech issues. And so a really, really effective way to do that is through digital advertising on social media. And so if that was the case in this example, I would recommend going that route. But again, I always think that in the background, if you can be investing in content, then it can be a twofold effect long term. But I would probably recommend advertising in a scenario like that, especially getting started.
Okay, thanks. So Justin, this might be maybe a bizarre question. Is that so we work with a lot of practice in there, right? They know they do like zero marketing, like zero but they have such a full practice in that there are more patients they can handle and one of the key ways they is such as a referral in there, right? I think at least not so much a new practice, practice being around, they just have a build up great, like the referral, like the physician knows them, they just sending patients. Like what do you have any tips for example, how does me as a provider, doctor to just tune up and amplify my referral network so that they could really steer patient around. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and we've run into this a lot because there's some subspecialties,
Mm,
either like rheumatology where they're booked out 3 months in advance because there's not enough of them, or like you said, they've been around for 20 years, and so you've got a really strong referral
mm,
ecosystem. So there's not a huge need for marketing outside of that. I wouldn't take that for granted because you just never know what tomorrow brings, like
mm,
COVID. So I would always be investing in protecting your reputation. And from a referral growth solidification standpoint, I would continue to reach out to not only your referral strengths, but potentially there's been a lot of new providers coming online and making sure you're building
mm,
referral relationships inside of those practices with them too, because eventually the people that, if you have been around for 20 or 25 years, could start retiring and you could take
mm,
a massive hit in your referral bases. So make
mm,
sure, don't forget the new guys that are coming in, the new people, the new providers in an ecosystem that are coming in and coming on board. And
mm,
obviously, I'd keep your accreditations up with the hospital strong, because as hospitals are purchasing more and more and more local practices, it's becoming a more closed off
mm.
ecosystem. So the more you can be credentialed and staffed at a hospital, the better you have potentials of getting referral sources from them too.
Got it. So is there like rule of thumb in terms, for example, suppose your practice being around for let's say 5, 10 years, what percentage should be patient through referral? What percentage of patient should be through these for marketing campaign?
That's good. I always, in today's environment, even in the last year before, take kind of COVID out of the situation if you can. Most historically well-rooted practices, like you just mentioned, have an 80-20
Mm,
potential, like referral base, like referrals are their powerhouse of their practice, and maybe 10 or 20% are coming from online. We've seen a little bit more of a shift to 70-30. I think that the closer from a long-term approach that you can get to 50-50 balance, the better
okay.
you're going to protect yourself long-term, as we don't know what the next year and a
Okay.
half brings from continuing to build referral relationships out in the field. But also too is, again, as hospitals purchase up more and more practice environments, you want to make sure you have a direct consumer marketing approach as well. So I would try, without obviously pulling back on any referral marketing, I would try to boost your online initiatives to a point where you can get close to that 60-40 mark, or 50-50
Mm,
if possible. And
I see.
sometimes if you're an oncologist, it could be you're still going to need to rely a lot on referrals, but you
Mm.
can still do a lot in a digital ecosystem to increase patient volumes.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense in there. Um, but just Melissa, thank you so much for sharing so much insight
Yeah,
into.
absolutely. I hope everybody got a lot out of it today. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I know there's like a bunch of other questions online. I apologize for all the people that question came up we didn't get to, but we'll send these questions to Justin. So again, we'll post the answer onto our page. So again, you can still get it again. So Justin's an amazing resource. Definitely reach out to him. Then as we maybe wrap up, maybe I'll just give you three like really rapid fire questions. Like, so what do you see as like the biggest healthcare marketing trends that you really like no one should ignore? So,
Yeah, that's great. So I think getting your providers involved in the storytelling, I think that's a really, really big shift. We've got younger providers that are coming in that are more adept and willing to get involved on social or help engage with patients. I think keeping that in mind, I think that's what patients want to see, is they want to have some type of online like relationship, what they feel like, with providers. I think that's a huge trend people need to get on board with, and providers need to get on board. I know it's one more thing for them to deal with. The other thing is, I think that you want to continue to um, refine your search strategy in a local environment, as far as really focus
yeah.
on getting better and better and better about content creation. I think is really, really important. And I think the third is, think through with what you do and what you offer, whether you're oncology and you can provide a support ecosystem for the family and the patients going through their journey, or you're a psychiatrist and you can provide daily motivational texts. Think of ways that you can use the information you have and collect more of it, like emails and phone numbers, to create a system So that way you always have that to go back to the well, so to speak, and you have a community of patients. So think about what you offer that's unique that you can turn into an online ecosystem to provide support, improve patient care, continue communication. I think those are the big things I would say to focus on.
That makes sense. And then maybe the final question for you is, I've been doing this for a long time within healthcare marketing. So what is this one thing that you believe that no one else believes yet?
Ooh, that's a good one, putting me on the spot. I think what I believe, and this even again happened today, is I believe that as hospitals are buying up more practices and providers are continuing to fight and pull back from kind of that monopoly feeling into creating their own autonomy and their own, I think you're going to see a lot more provider direct point of care, like them creating their own ecosystems and leveraging telemedicine to, just like this doctor's moonlighting. I'm seeing more and more and more doctor entrepreneurship of them thinking outside of the box of how can we take healthcare back and go direct to consumer and solve the broken parts of the healthcare system. So I believe that we're just going to continue to see a larger and larger shift in doctor entrepreneurship and really cool things starting to pop up with people getting really inventive of how they can fix healthcare. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be coming along.
Oh, that is really exciting in there. Justin, thank you so much for sharing your insight with our audience, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a blast. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody learned a lot. Thank you so much again for having me.
Okay, thank you so much.